What a difference a year has made for the Strait Area business community, especially this past year. The Strait Area Chamber of Commerce held its annual State of the Strait Economic Development Conference just this past week in Port Hawkesbury. The last time they held such a meeting, it was just a few days before Nova Scotia declared its first state of emergency as the COVID-19 pandemic swept through Atlantic Canada and the rest of the country. How has the local business community been adapting through all of this? We decided to check in with the Chamber of Commerce's Executive Director, Misty MacDonald, for the answers. Here's our interview right now. And we're pleased to welcome for her first visit to Telile 24/7, the Executive Director of the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce. Her name is Misty MacDonald. Misty, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for asking, Adam.
Obviously, you folks have come through the pandemic just like the rest of us are, still dealing with the way things are going. I know that last week you folks had the Chamber's annual State of the Strait address, but before we speak to that particular event, I would like to actually just ask you what you feel the state of the Strait is in terms of its small business community at this point of the COVID-19 era. How do you feel everybody is coping at this point?
I think that currently people are still, just like you said, they're coping and everybody is managing to get through. There's still a lot of supports available, so businesses have been able to take advantage of that. Time will tell as to what happens when those supports run out. Hopefully, if we can continue in a positive direction in the province with restrictions being lowered and start to get back to somewhat of a new normal, I think that overall many businesses will fare out pretty good. Of course, there's some stories where people have either pivoted or they've done extremely well during the pandemic. And then, of course, there's certain industries that haven't fared out so well. So time will tell, I believe.
We're having this conversation just a couple of days after restrictions loosened up again in Nova Scotia. Now, restaurants and licensed establishments, retail establishments, and fitness facilities like gymnasiums are able to open up to 100% capacity, of course, with physical distancing still maintained. I imagine mask policies will still be in effect in a lot of these businesses. What did you think when you heard the news that this was opening up? Was it a bit of a sigh of relief on your part, or what are you folks at the chamber, and what do you think the business people you're talking to think about these restrictions being loosened a bit?
I'm sure, especially for the restaurant owners, having increased capacity is going to be critical to them to move forward. I think that in the chamber office here, we're probably like most people, we're cautiously optimistic. We've seen what's happened in other parts of, I guess, the continent, really, where restrictions have been loosened and then they've had to be tightened up again. And I think today there's been a lot of talk about new variants in the cases that they're seeing. So we need to, it's great to open, but we still need to be stringent with the masks and the sanitation and be careful to protect our customers and to protect our staff and everybody else. So I think, like I said, cautious optimism is right now the outlook.
So let's talk a little bit, as I mentioned a couple of moments ago, about an event that the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce has every year called the State of the Strait. It's an economic update and also a chance for some of the players, both large and small in our business community, to speak about what things are like for them. Now, obviously, we're in different times. That's been the theme all the way throughout the past 13 months, and we've talked about that a little bit in this interview. But Misty, can you tell me what the mood was like for those participating in the State of the Strait this year? What were some of the moments that really jumped out for you?
Well, I guess operationally, first of all, the last public event that we've had in person was the State of the Strait, which happened in 2020. So right about that time, I believe that was on a Wednesday, and that Friday, the announcement of the state of emergency in Nova Scotia came out, and things changed quite rapidly. So we're pretty well a little bit over a year from that point. And I think that generally people were just happy to be able to get together in person again. It seemed like there was really a lot of people just grateful to be out and able, even though that we had to put in certain restrictions, in order to host that event publicly, it was still nice to be able to get out and hear people give their presentations in person. Overall, we almost had a little bit of a COVID theme run through the event. Terry Smith from Destination Cape Breton was our first presenter, and Terry kind of gave an update on the strategy for DCBA going forward. Now, of course, Terry had been beginning to present that strategy at this time last year, and the strategy obviously would have been impacted severely by COVID. So it was interesting to get that update from him. Then the next panel kind of focused on businesses that had in some way been affected by the pandemic and how they've coped and managed and moved on. Some were impacted negatively at first and were able to, either switch their product or service in some way. And then the third one was actually a realtor who has seen increased demand and not enough supply for their business, so which has been directly pandemic related. So that was very interesting. Our second panel, we heard from 3 businesses that really things have been business as usual, and they've been kind of marching forward. So very positive, very optimistic news. I think originally, early in the pandemic, those businesses were anticipating to be affected more than they actually were. So it was a really good news story. And our final panel kind of spoke about municipal infrastructure projects that may have begun before the pandemic, but were currently happening. So of course, we all know that generally the build out of a recession is with infrastructure. So it was great to be able to see what kinds of projects they were and how that's going to play out. And then our keynote was with Ken Shea from East Coast Credit Union. So he kind of gave the overall summary of, where things are headed with the economy. Of course, in Nova Scotia, we continue to struggle with this concept of the population decline and the aging population that is coming in the next 20, 30 years. So very interesting wrap up by Ken. And yeah, overall, the event went really, really well. We were pleased to have it in public, and that it was just people were happy to hear those good news stories, I think, coming out of the last 13 months when things were sounding pretty bleak.
I wanted to ask you about support for small businesses and support that the Chamber itself provides. This time last year, I was speaking to Susan Fox and to Amanda Mumberket, who were in the transition period for the Chamber of Commerce just before you came on board. They told me a little bit about some of the programs that are available to help everything from realigning and pivoting a business to just dealing with things like mental and emotional health. And I just wondered, Misty, are you able to talk a little bit about some of those programs today and what the Chamber is offering for its members in terms of pandemic era support at this point?
Yeah, well, I think the majority of the work that the Chamber has been able to provide related to the pandemic is really information sharing for our members, because of course a lot of the programs either came from the federal or provincial government, usually through other entities. So basically we were a point of contact where we could help businesses navigate through those particular services. As I said, I mean, one of the recent announcements from the federal government was more extensions on the CEWS funding, the CEWS, which is the wage subsidy. Also, the CEBA loan funding has been extended to the end of June, I believe. And then I think the Premier recently made some announcements as far as some property tax rebates for tourism-based businesses in the last month or so. So there's a few programs out there that people are still able to take advantage of till the end of June, which is great. And like I said, past that, it'll remain to be seen if that gets extended again, or if people are kind of expected to fly on their own after that point. So
we'll certainly be looking to the next few weeks and months to see whether some of these programs will be renewed. We'll hope for the best there. As we're looking ahead, I want to look ahead at another annual event that the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce is a huge part of. FemPower, centering on and celebrating women in business. I know there was a successful event that took place even under the early days of COVID-19. It became a virtual event, but still went very well this time last year. And I understand it's happening at the end of April. What can you tell me about this conference and about why it's so important for the Strait Area Chamber to take part in it?
Well, I think that as part of the Chamber's role, we advocate for business and we advocate for our membership. And one of the groups that's been most heavily impacted by COVID is definitely women in the workplace. So women's leadership issues have been really high on the list of priorities for the last couple of years for the Chamber, which is what spurred this event. But basically, it's an opportunity for women to get together and focus on a lot of maybe the softer side of things that don't often get talked about in your general conference setting. So there's a lot about self-care, burnout, time management, issues like that, money management that kind of tailored for that female audience. And the studies show that leadership amongst women is going to be very important as far as coming out of the pandemic. So I think as much as we can support our female entrepreneurs and our women in business in general, the better.
Well, we want to wrap up the interview by continuing to look forward, Misty, and we've talked a little bit about some of the wage subsidy programs and other federal initiatives. We're waiting to hear on those, about looking ahead to FemPower. Beyond that, where do we go from here? There's still so much uncertainty in terms of looking ahead to the next 12 months and making our way, tiptoeing through the third wave, as it were, here in Canada. But what are you feeling yourself as you look ahead to the next 12 months or even the next 6 months for the business community? Do you get the sense that the strength that has been developed during this pandemic time will help out the local business owners? What's your feeling about the times ahead?
I think locally in Cape Breton and the Strait area in general, we're pretty resilient folk, as we all know. So I think that we're probably poised very well to recover. I think that it will be continue just as it's been, as you said, tiptoeing through to see what things are going to happen, because there's still a great amount of uncertainty out there. But I think that things definitely changes that people have had to implement into their businesses will continue, and they'll be stronger as a result of going through this.
I hope so. We've covered a lot of ground in a short time here, Misty, and I appreciate you taking some time with me. Did you have anything else that you wanted to add about all this just before we wrap up?
I think from the Chamber perspective, we're in the same boat as the businesses. So we're just basically trying to get our programs back up and running. So workplace training courses are happening all the time. They've been moved online, which has actually enabled us to reach a much wider audience around the province, which is fantastic. There's new training coming on board all the time, another great benefit to that. And yeah, we look forward to getting back into the swing of things and being able to personally visit with members and help businesses succeed in any way we can.
Well, we wish you all the very best, both at the Chamber office and for the business community itself here in the Strait area as you go forward. And in the meantime, it's been great to talk to you today. Thank you, Misty, for giving us a few moments here on Telile 24/7.
That's great. Thanks so much, Adam.
No trouble at all. Misty MacDonald is the Executive Director of the Strait Area Chamber of Commerce, and we've been speaking to her from her office here in Port Hawkesbury.